Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Whole Elephant. Thank you for joining me today. If you've been on this journey, we're at episode 7 of Talking to Different People. And if this is your first time here, welcome. This is The Whole Elephant. My name is Eric McClenahan. It's based off of the poem The Blind Man and the Elephant, where 6 blind men are asked to describe an elephant, and each one simply describes it by the first part that they touch. And so this is my journey of trying to see the whole elephant, not just the perspective that I know, not just the perspective I'm living right now, but trying to have discussions where I can see beyond myself, beyond my community, beyond my culture, and learn and grow. And so today is a perfect example of that. Tim Minchin is an incredible comedian, writer, actor, Broadway composer. I mean, the list goes on and on of what he's done. But he made a kind of a career of bashing Christianity. That's where he kind of rose to fame, the path that he took to rise to fame. But when I was introduced to his work and I started to dive into it, I was really struck because I wasn't offended. Even though I'm a pastor and I work at a church, he was calling out the things that I also call out within Christianity. And the more I listened to him, the more I kind of dove into his work, I realized there were so many similarities. If we were a Venn diagram, we overlapped a lot more than we didn't overlap when it came to values and morals and how we saw life. And so I just kind of became fascinated by how are two people on completely different ends of the spectrum when it comes to religion and faith landing on so much common ground. How is this happening? And so, to call myself a fan of Tim's work would be kind of an understatement. Just to set the tone for this, Tim Minchin artistically is my hero. This is who I aspire to be. His work is incredible. I love it on a very deep level. And the fact that we're even having this conversation today is amazing to me. I was so honored that he said yes to coming on this podcast. And so sit back. We are going to talk a lot about religion, about faith, about what he believes, about what I believe, about the differences in those things, about the commonalities in those things. And I hope that you walk away maybe seeing one of our perspectives from a little different perspective, a little different view than maybe you did before. Enjoy the chat. Hey, Tim.
Hi, Eric.
How are you, man?
I'm good.
Welcome to the Whole Elephant.
Thanks.
I'm a little sad. You have an elephant there, don't you? You're not showing your elephant.
Oh, yeah, I can show you my elephant. Shall I see your elephant? There he is. But you can only see half the elephant, obscured, ironically, by a hourglass. Which, irony on irony, doesn't function. The sand doesn't flow through it.
Does that elephant, is it significance or is it just a cool elephant?
Well, I don't know. Does a cool elephant have to be any more than a cool elephant, Eric?
No.
Can't it just be a cool elephant? I bought it for my one of my nesting instincts. I'm not amazing at looking ahead, and when my wife is, so it didn't really matter. But when we first had our baby, we'd only just moved to London, and so we had all the basics and stuff. But my response to having a baby was sort of spasmodically going out and buying it cheap stuff. Yeah. So I bought it like a singing pig and an elephant light. And then there used to be a light globe in him, and I've lost that bit. So now he's just a plastic elephant.
This is a great start for a podcast that I've gotten us on. An elephant that nobody can see on this podcast. It's good.
Yeah, totally.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I think it's important to mostly discuss visuals.
Yeah.
It'd be tough having an podcast, wouldn't it?
How's life in Sydney right now? You guys are opening back up? Did I see that Frozen was actually in a theater last night?
Up. Well, today or sometime this week, we were meant to find out that the borders between New South Wales, where Sydney is, and West Australia, where the rest of my family is, were going to be open. and then one person got found with COVID. So it's all probably not going to open, which is a good indicator of the difference between where we're at and where you're at with COVID. That if there's one community case, the border's shut again.
Yeah, that is not where we are at.
That is not where you're at. You're at 100,000 in hospital.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been odd. I mean, my little community up here in the foothills about, suburb of LA hasn't been hit hard. Our hospitals have been relatively empty, but we're still in close proximity to the cities that have been hit hard. It's been crazy.
I assume the numbers correlate with poverty, like every bad thing.
Yeah. And we have a lot of, single family houses, not as many apartment buildings and people living on top of each other. So I'm sure that matters.
Yeah.
Or for business. It's nice that Sydney's. Are your kids in school?
They were. Well, one of my kids doesn't really go to school because she's not very well, and the other kid, she's one of these kids who's having huge problems with her brain, and the other kid just finished. Yeah, so they finished a couple of days ago.
Yeah,
because it's our big summer break, of course. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. When my daughter can get back into school, that's when the tides will turn for us.
Yeah. That must make a difference. And what about the church? I mean, no one's coming, obviously.
Well, we just started. We're allowed to do outdoor services at 25% capacity out in our parking lot. Most people just watch online. We've been live streaming services. We were live streaming services for the past 5 or 6 years, so we were ready for this. But there's about 70 or so that come out into the parking lot and are masked and distanced. I don't know who wants to come and sing with a mask on and those things, but people that are super lonely and have been missing it, it's been nice for them.
Yeah, it's interesting talking in America about masks has become an absurdly, like so many things are political when they shouldn't be. Data is apolitical and masks either have an effect or don't, just like climate change is either happening or it's not. But the discussion that you don't have is hear as much as the psychological effect of them. Like there's a reason why people hate wearing them apart from the discomfort. And I find it like really hard not seeing how people's mouths are. Like I really hate it. I really feel a sort of weird disconnect and not being able to see whether they're smiling or not. Yeah, it's pretty.
Yeah, I mean that outdoor service. I'm singing to people who I think are singing and enjoying what I'm doing, but I just see a mask. Yeah, I mean, not just political. It's also religious. I don't need one. God will protect me. Sorts of things are the things I venture into sometimes. Also.
Yeah, of course.
Super fun.
Do people actually think that?
Pockets, right? I mean, not everybody, especially the church I go to and the people that I'm around. That's not a common thing, but it's out there.
But the idea that God will protect you from a disease, but can't stop a bus hitting you if you stand in front of it is, like either God's a puppeteer or he's not, or, it's quite, and that's why I'm so interested in that. So much of belief, not just religiosity, but just belief in general, sort of is discreet and convenient. We all do it. All our narratives are there to buoy us up. But, I guess it's writ large in religious belief in that it's so molded to fit what you need it to be in any given moment,
Totally. No, I mean, I don't think this is just a religious problem. I would say maybe problem with humanity in general is we all walk around thinking we're the protagonist of the story. And
hero or the victim.
Yeah. And especially in Western American Christianity, I am the hero of the story, and I happen to have a sidekick God who
Yeah.
helps me get what I want when I need and
Yeah.
protects me when I need him to, and all those things. That's a massive thing. And
And
that's
even
like,
if I'm just really bad, I can still get forgiveness.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, that is a problem. We talk about that all the time. Like, that's a problem from the beginning. The way that we teach Christianity to our kids.
Yeah.
We highlight specific people in the Bible instead of teaching the thing as a whole. You read the thing as a whole, and you're like, I, I don't think God is interacting in a specific one-on-one linear way with humanity. It's just not there in the Bible. We take
Yeah.
stories like, we'll take like Moses, right? And we'll say like,
Yeah.
look, God used Moses to free people from slavery, and it's this big story, and yay, and God can free you from whatever you're going through.
Yeah.
But that story comes after 400 years of being enslaved.
Yeah.
400 years of people dying in slavery, not getting that redemption, but we
Yeah.
only tell the one little story and then sell that as hope.
That's an amazing way of describing it. And then that hope comes, and there's lots of exceptions to this in the Bible, I'm sure, although I'm not great with the text. But that hope in the case of Moses comes with a massive magic intervention, literally a Deus ex machina, where you
Right.
get to change physics. And the lesson, really, if you read the whole thing, is if you're enslaved, the only way you're going to get out is if something impossible happens. And that's a terrible lesson. If it's taken it's taken with any literal meaning at all. It's a terrible, terrible lesson. The only
Yeah.
thing that can stop your miserable life is a magic wand.
Right. Well, and there are certainly stories, that don't act that way, that we've changed. Like, David and Goliath comes to mind. A little kid with a magic, slingshot kills the giant.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've seen Malcolm Gladwell's take on that story.
Yeah, I have. It's fantastic.
It's
What
amazing.
a surprise that technology outdoes a big dumb person who knows nothing.
Yes.
He
It's not
invented a weapon.
magic. He
No.
invented a weapon, and he was really good at it, and it was the exact thing that was needed in that moment.
Yeah,
I love his take on that.
totally. And look, aren't you a hero, David? You took down probably someone with a hormone problem, probably just some big dumb galoot soldier with with some sort of disorder, and you took him down with tech.
Yeah.
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 It's so funny and so obvious once you see it like that. Of course it is. That's the interesting thing about biblical mythology and mythology in general. And
Right.
what I try to do with Woody Allen Jesus and stuff is like, go, hold on, we're all scrambled by the age of the sort of antiquity part of it and the esoteric nature of the language. Let's try and scrub all that and just tell the story with modern words and see if it stands up as something sacred. And of course, as soon as you take age and language away from any of these stories and put them in modern parlance, they sort of lose their, unfortunately, slightly lose their magic,
Yeah.
which introduces a whole other topic, which is the importance of language in narrative and the importance of allowing things to be mythological and old so they can hold the weight of metaphor and something bigger than me.
Sure. It's a letting go. It's a, we can look at it through our lens now and let go of things that maybe we believed 100 years ago, because we have new science, or because we have psychology's figured out a different thing. We can grow and morph and change in faith, like anything else, I think.
Yeah. But there's an argument to be had about how reductively you should look at the world, and what we're talking about is being reductive about mythology. Let's break this down to its constituent parts and and pick through it and see if there's anything there. But if you break something down to a small enough parts, anything, you'll find there's nothing there, even matter. Even if you look close enough at matter, there's nothing there. Certainly, if you look at consciousness, there's nothing there. And, so then you take that to stories. Should we reduce these myths down to examinable parts that take away their magic? I mean, obviously, I spend my life doing so, but I also, on the other hand, I spend my life talking about the importance of narratives and what stories we tell ourselves.
Sure. Well, I think so. I mean, I think people, Pastor Dave, my boss, who you have met before and chatted with.
I've potted with Pastor Dave.
Yes. They know that I am not a mystical spiritual person. I read the Bible in a different way, I feel, than most people do. But I feel like when I take away that stuff, that there's still substance there.
Yeah.
There's still a worthy story there.
Yeah.
So
I mean? Can we get into that a bit? I've got lots of questions about this, and I sort of kind of hoped that the whole elephant was about this, because since you've gone on this whole journey, which I've witnessed the end of, I guess, and have played I'm a bit part in that story.
Yeah.
And so my questions, I've got lots, but has your relationship with Pastor Dave, was there a coming out? Because, to correct me if I'm wrong, you probably would have, you've had a significant change in your attitude towards your own faith in the last 3 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you were musical director for how long have you been musical director of Montrose for?
I've been at this church for 14 and a half years.
Yeah. So how's it gone? How's the conversation been? And I mean, I know Dave's really, progressive and stuff as well, but did you sort of sit down over a few tequilas and go, look, I just, the kind of real, if you look me in the eye and say, do you believe Jesus had magic powers? I have to say no, sort of thing.
Right. How did it happen? The truth is that it probably couldn't have happened in a lot of places. That
yes,
Dave gave me the freedom and the grace to ask those questions. And I would say it's mostly, I came to a point where the way I had been taught Christianity as a kid and just kind of held on to no longer made sense in the real world. And so I really had to systematically make my way through all my beliefs and tear them apart and then build them back up into something else. And he's been a huge part of that journey for me, as has things outside of Christianity has been a huge part of that journey for me. And
your wife?
Very much on the same boat with me, asking the same questions. She's Salvadorian, and so grew up in a Salvadorian culture that's even kind of more a lot of superstition and
am I right in assuming they're Catholic, Salvadorians?
Probably not this family specifically, but a lot of those same kind of old school traditions and beliefs and
saints
myths
and gifts and
even like our baby has hiccups, we'll go get a red string and lick it and put it on her forehead.
Oh, gorgeous. Right. So there's sort of old mysticism.
Yeah.
Which would probably, like I'd love to look into that, because there'll be, like all cultures, when a massive like pop religion intersects with a culture with its pre-existing religious traditions, they don't, this idea that one takes over the other is half true. The big one gets to keep the title, just like empires, just like it's like cricket being introduced to India. Like Indians don't play cricket because it's English. They play it because it's been amalgamated, and religions like that, right? You just like Christmas is a perfect example where Christianity got imposed on these people, and they're like, sure, we'll say prayers to Jesus, but we're going to bring our our pagan traditions of trees and decorations and presents, and it's all pre-Christian stuff that's been wrapped into it.
Right. It's a lot
Even
of
to the
stuff.
extent that Jesus's birth got shifted to the solstice to suit the pagan tradition.
It was December 25th, Tim.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay. You got the birth certificate. You're a truther. Yeah.
Biblical realist over here.
It's just born of a virgin, December 25, 00. It's there.
Yes. And the world was created in 7 days, and there was a big flood, and Noah sailed the boat.
Yeah. Do people believe that? Does anyone believe that stuff?
Our church doesn't wade into those sorts of.
It doesn't wade into the flood waters of Noah's.
I mean, we're always taking it for what the story is supposed to teach us. We don't consider it to be a scientific document. So, Are there people who believe that sit in our congregation? Probably, but there's never a forum to find out who does and who doesn't.
So one of the only sort of moment in my podcast with Pastor Dave and you that even approached any sort of let's find out where we disagree really was I can't quite remember, but I think there was something around I think I said something about, well, but why not just take the magic away then? Why not just, or something like that? Or did I, or also I think maybe I said something about, but why this story over other stories? Anyway.
Why does Jesus have to be magic? I think is what you said.
Why does Jesus have to be magic? Yeah, we agree on everything, except somehow you need to predicate your version of ethics and morality on someone having not been constrained by physics. And a sort of addendum to that question, I guess, is how do you, as someone who is obviously incredibly bright and in the last few years have let yourself off the leash in terms of your examination of the world, I think I know the answer to this, but I'd be interested in, or at least I suspect a version of the answer. I loved you saying you broke it down and built something else. I mean, I picture Christianity, and when you said that, I pictured Lego bricks, and you going, okay, these Lego bricks have sort of been glued into this position, but I'm going to crumble them all and build something that's also beautiful, made out of some of the same bricks, but I'm going to add some other bricks, right? But how do you? I understand that. My understanding is that you have probably had times in the last few years where you've thought, I don't think I can still work at this church because of my agnosticism, and you have come around to thinking you can. So, and I think that sort of, as I've followed your journey, given me great relief, because I think one of the hardest things about shrugging off your faith is that you shrug off community, and especially people who've been brought up in religious communities, they'll find there is an emptiness behind it. I wish it weren't so, but if you've been brought up in a Christian community, you will struggle to replace it. It's why so many ex-Christians are such fervent atheists, because they still want to be a part of a club,
Right.
So anyway, I love that you've changed the shape of your Legos, but how do you, I think you and I would agree, sorry, this is like all my questions becomes a lecture. It's like Sam Harris. Why do you privilege that story? You must know that you could build a church just on the works of Shakespeare and draw from Shakespeare all the lessons, and they're more modern. They're only 400 years old instead of 2,000, so you don't get caught up in weird stuff about different types of cloth. Shakespeare's work does have some redundancies and some sexism and anti-Semitism and racism that you'd have to step around, just like you do in the Bible. But it's a bit more forward about talking about sex and desire and death and it's huge amounts of questioning of faith. And as I say, I think I know the answer to the question, but can you speak to your comfort or discomfort with the sort of bibliophilia, the kind of the obsession with that text over infinite other moral guides?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it has to start from the place where I learned love and joy and peace and all of these things. Um, I learned it inside of Christianity. It was
Yeah.
ingrained in me, and my entire community growing up displayed it for me in such a beautiful way. I
Right.
mean,
So Christianity
family
in action in your life was always positive, well, nearly always positive.
and continues to be. I mean,
Yeah.
Obviously I see the negatives out in the world, but I didn't experience that myself. Everything I was taught was in the context of Christianity. And
Yeah.
so, I like the Lego thing. I I I also think of it as a marble sculpture you got to chisel away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I've been chiseling away trying to figure it out. And if I end up chiseling it all down and there's nothing there, then so be it.
You can
But I
stand on the
haven't
plinth yourself.
I haven't gotten to that point yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking up Lego elephants. Um, um, yeah, and that makes absolute sense. And I people like me often get asked, do you ever wish that you could have, I've seen dyed in the wool atheists say, I wish I could believe in God,
Mm,
I'm jealous of people who have belief, but I just
yeah,
can't because it's bollocks. And I'm like, I've never related to that. I don't wish I believed in God. I don't even know what that phrase means. It's like saying, I wish I believed in Flanubel Pip. Because I have no,
right,
the whole idea of God doesn't exist in my head. I've never got a good answer. I've spoken to you about this. No one's given me a definition that satisfies even a beginning.
right.
But I understand that that's partly a category error, because God as a thing you can define, people like me are looking for something that people who believe in it, it's a category error. That's not what it is to them. It's a
Sure.
non thing, not a thing. And I'm trying to make it a thing. But what I am envious of is community, and I have a specific problem in that I lived all around the world, and B, I got famous to the extent that I did a little bit, and
Right.
and you that is why famous people and super rich people are not very happy, because they get build walls around themselves,
Yeah.
often literally.
Yeah.
And if you move a lot, of course, you're trying to build communities wherever you go, and then you keep leaving them, and so what I am envious of and very respectful of in your case is that you've grown up with a set of beliefs which were a structure around which a community was built, where their focus was on ethics and generosity,
Right.
I presume, of all the different ways you can be generous, of
Totally.
spirit and hope. And I'm sure there's a bunch of the prejudice and stuff that simmers underneath, like any community, but not particularly, and probably arguably in some churches less.
Right.
If they're doing their jobs right. The whole point is to break down those prejudices and to then go on a journey that makes you question the framework, the narrative framework of what built that community, to realize that there's no actual truth in it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean truth as in spiritual truths. I mean truth as in, like, the story is not true.
Sure.
And then to go, but the thing that story supports is a beautiful thing, and I'm not going to walk away from it.
Right.
I feel quite, as I say, admiring of that and a little bit jealous.
Right. Yeah. I feel like where I am in the process right now is, okay, these things aren't jiving with the fact that I'm 38 and have a more of a worldview and knowledge than I was when I was 16 and like super gung-ho about all these things. So can I tear it down, redefine it with the help of people like Pastor Dave and really, really smart authors that I read? And I need to figure out what it truthfully is first before I even think about getting rid of it completely. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm not yeah, it totally makes sense. And I'm not, I mean, maybe the future is that you help redefine the sculpture or rebuild the Lego elephant or re-narrativize the foundations. Maybe you're part of the church continuing to move, because there are churches in them, you know, these Unitarian cats. I mean, they basically have done an Eric. These are whole institutions that have kept reading, and a hell of a lot of Judaism as well. They've just kept reading until they realize the whole thing's obviously cray-cray.
Right.
And gone, well, yeah, but we're not throwing away the structure. We're not throwing away the community. We're not throwing away the idea of examining ourselves. And, you know, the way you talk about all this stuff reminds me of some of my kind of Unitarian friends. I think it's Unitarianism, isn't it? That's sort of like almost godless.
Mm-hmm.
That what they call themselves? Anyway, you know, so maybe your church with people like you in its leadership will just, and you talking to Dave will continue to just drift away from, you know, or be more articulate in saying our position is that this book is as good a starting point as any for discussions about how to be a good human.
Right.
And we gather here to sing songs about that, you know.
Right. Yeah. No, I get that. I think as a church, our focus is, that's kind of along the same lines, I think, is just starting with not building walls between us and the community.
Yeah.
By not having a belief that says, I can't have a conversation with Tim Minchin about this stuff. Or why would I build up a wall to then not be able to serve poor people with Tim, or feed hungry people with Tim? And I think so much of American Christianity right now is those walls that are keeping us from doing anything extended across humanity outside of Christianity.
Yeah, that's right. And so the I guess where the rubber hits the road with this conversation is, what is so just circle back a bit, what is the value of deconstructing the scientifically impossible tenets of Christianity? Where does it matter? Why does atheism matter in this conversation, given that I'm, you know, I kind of made my name on really eviscerating certain types of belief?
Yeah.
What is the value in that, given that you and I don't think I ever would have been far from this position. I guess I've grown and changed and been through stuff and reprioritized stuff, but I never would have said, or, you know, let's burn the churches down. I've always been this sort of moderate atheist that I am. So given that there are a bunch of Christians like you in the world, is it the majority?
No.
Is it a majority who really go to church in order to do what Jesus did, to help people less fortunate than themselves? It's probably not, is it?
I don't think so.
So we don't want to build walls, but we do want to take a fucking pickaxe to some of the walls that have been built in the Lord's name. And that's where our lovely, cuddly conversation has to be put aside, and Christians like you and atheists like me need to keep finding ways to go, oh no, you don't get to use the Bible to justify your homophobia or your racism or your nationalism or your Trump obsession.
Sure.
And in doing that work, they will say, yeah, but God says. And you'll have to say, yeah, but God doesn't exist, mate. Because that's the strongest argument is, yeah, you're appealing to magic to justify your very earthly, shitty belief. And you have to say, if it was in a court of law and someone said, well, I flew this plane into this building, or I beat up this trans person because the Bible says that it's an abomination, at some point, some lawyer will have to say to some judge, but God doesn't exist, judge. The God they're talking about, at very least, doesn't exist. And the judge will say, well, how do you know that God doesn't exist? Your God comes from the same book and you've interpreted it to mean that. And the lawyer will say, well, let's just all agree that God doesn't exist at all and doesn't think anything about humankind, because then we can get on with a moral discussion based on being kind to one another,
Right.
So at some point it matters to deconstruct that the fact that it is not morally but factually incorrect to appeal to God for your ethical starting point. Tune in next time for Eric's answer.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, but a lot of those things that you talk about come from a misreading of scripture, come from a cultural misreading, or you know what I'm saying? That's what
of course.
that's what I want to get rid of, to get down to the core of, to find the truth at the core. And I haven't found the core to be false.
Yeah, but this is where you and I will depart, and it really is the difference between, well, for now, is the if this conversation is to find out where we part, which is much more interesting because we already know we agree about everything that matters.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a truth at the core. It's just a bunch of cobbled together stories, and that it has been through an amazing evolutionary pressure. The Bible, it's been collected and manipulated, and the way that it's been translated has been massively connected to politics and exclusivity. Make sure it's only in Latin so that only the priests can have their communion with God and the poor peasants, and that whole period of Christianity, which is where it really, the whole thing's built on like politics and exclusivity. And yet you're saying at the center of this is this story that, yes, it's been misused in all these ways. But you just said to me, and it slightly surprises me that you said, and I'm sure you could say a bunch of different things about it, but you said that those things are based on misreadings of the scripture. And the place where I depart from you is there is no misreading of the scripture. If you can use your star signs to justify what job you take, I mean, the Bible is just a horoscope. It's just a lot of really interesting stories, but it's a Rorschach test, right? There is no right or wrong with a Rorschach test. It's not either a butterfly or a person murdering a baby. It's whatever the person sees. And the trouble is, and I've said this before, but I almost said it a few minutes ago, but just to put a finer point on it, the thing is that morality is human. It's not divine. And you know that because anything that's ever been called divine has been used in all directions. You know that the thing that makes you moral is nothing to do with the fact that you and I have basically the same moral code is a perfect example. You press yours against a Christian upbringing. I press mine against an irreligious upbringing, and we come out with the same answer because morality is a human endeavor, a human, and emergent property of our consciousnesses and our increasingly intelligent understanding of our equality and equivalence. And if you use your God, and here's me almost quoting myself and probably a million other people, if you use your God to justify why you want to give to the poor, you can't philosophically argue with someone who uses their God to drive planes into buildings, because you're both basing your actions on something that you can't talk about. You can't give me a shape. I can't call him up. We can't debate whether he's got a penis or defecates. Does God own a dog? Does he live in the clouds? That he or she is a non-entity that you are using to feed the poor and someone else is using to cut people's heads off. And you can't go to the basis of their belief and say, you're wrong, because you're making the same error. The only way you can argue with that person is to say, hold on, morality is a human endeavor.
Yeah. I mean, except for the fact that within Christianity, the belief is that that God put himself on earth in the form of Jesus to give us the full revelation of who God is. Mm-hmm. And so that example is what we follow to say, I'm going to feed the poor.
Yeah. But what if someone's really into the Old Testament? You know, what if, oh, yeah.
Got a small child.
Oh, who's that child?
I don't know. It's Pastor Dave's grandson.
Oh, he looks like a nice kid. He should come and get in this conversation. You know, but you've got to understand, you're choosing to privilege that bit of all the religious texts in the world. You've gone, well, I think the true one is that God manifested himself in a hairy preacher, and you know, and the preacher sacrificed himself in the same way we used to kill lambs. Like I know it's the basis of the New Testament, and that's the one that Christianity goes with. But if you're reading the nastier bits of the Quran or the nastier bits of the Old Testament, and you go, no, this is the word of God, it's hard for you to argue, no, this bit.
Sure.
You meant to look at this bit. Don't look at that bit. Look at this bit, you know?
Right. Well, I mean, yes. So what do I want to say? I think that's what I've discovered over the last couple of years, is not only does what I believe have to jive with what I've believed inside the church, it has to be true and make sense outside. Yeah. Because when you say that morality is a humanity thing, I see that you and I land on a lot of the same morals and values, because there's a God that has wrapped himself around all of time and all of space and reveals himself through nature and all those things, so that everyone that is experiencing love, experiencing joy, experiencing peace is that communal connection that we have.
Yeah. So to put it another way, yes, morality is a human thing, but humanity is a God thing.
Yes. Which is why to me, there's no sense in building up walls. That's why to me, I want to talk to you, because I see it in your art and what you create. And I look at it and go, hey, I recognize that. I want to talk about that. What is that?
Yeah. Well, it's the absence of God, man. That's what you're seeing. You're seeing a life free of, it's really interesting, because I don't only not believe in what you believe, I don't believe in your belief of what you believe.
Sure.
That, or at least I don't quite I have huge. I love the way you talk about this stuff. It's quite inspiring. I love that you said God has wrapped himself around. I love it. But it's almost like when you go into that language, it's like you're settling into the four chords. It's like you're having a conversation, and then you're just like,
I'm going.
yeah, and God has wrapped his arms around. And it's like,
one
yeah,
564.
totally, and it's totally uplifting.
Yeah.
But I can feel you settling into your chords, and I think that's what I find. I think I really like it. I really like those chords, and I love hearing them. But I'm like, part of me is like, oh, Eric, you don't actually. You're very tempted to not go back to the one there. You want to key change it. Like when I say I don't believe in people's belief, what I mean is, with the exception of some really not very thoughtful people, this idea of faith and all the challenges it comes with it, all you guys, every good priest and has always said, look, your faith will be challenged. And the church has all this self-correcting stuff, like all good cult, all good belief system, whether it's landmark education or Scientology. Not that I'm comparing them, because I don't think you should, but
yeah,
they always have self-correcting stuff. So, and your church is not like all churches, but this idea that if you lose faith, if you have a crisis of faith, these are the reasons you're having it, at its literal worst, the devil and, all this nonsense.
Sure.
And these are the things you need to do to come home to the Lord. And it's like, so even your questioning is, God has his arms wrapped around your questioning as well, right? Or he's put his little creepy fingers all through your questioning. And so your questioning is even wrapped up in faith. And so when people talk about their belief, especially thoughtful people, I, as someone without belief, have trouble even believing that they believe their belief, because I know they're having to run two programs, and one program's buzzing away going dissonance, and the other one's like going resolves the dissonance within the story, But I mean, I'm less interested in this conversation, because at this point it feels like I'm trying to get a gotcha or trap you into admitting that that this is nothing more than a narrative structure and you don't actually believe there's a God at all. And I'm not even slightly interested in that.
Neither am I. This is not like, go grab a glass of water and by the end of this I'm baptizing you, or I'm an atheist. There's no point. That's not what I want to do. That's not the journey I'm on.
I mean, we might end up there, but not on this podcast. It might be 5 years hence when the world opens back up.
There you go. I'll come visit you and baptize you.
Yeah. Well, come and hop in the ocean here. You'll have a it'll feel divine enough for you.
Yeah,
it's pretty nice.
No, but I mean, that's where I am today, and I'm in a different spot today than I was 5-6 years ago. And you said earlier you played a part in that, and it's true. The first time I saw you was HBO or Showtime or something was airing the big orchestra concert.
Didn't you see Matilda first?
Nope. I was sitting in my living room, and the first thing that I saw was "Thank You, God." And as an entry point for a Christian, that's a rough entry point.
That's like taking the big pill first. Just swallow this. No, you don't get a glass of water. Swallow.
Yeah. And I remember distinctly going, what the heck is this? And I can't show it to anybody. Like, I can't talk about this with anybody.
You click share and then you just unclick share.
Yeah. But I mean, it, obviously, first of all, the who is this guy up there, which is what you were going for with the hair and the makeup and
Mm-hmm.
it caught my attention. And
Mm-hmm.
then obviously the lyrical tricks and all the stuff like that was, what the heck is this? This is incredible. And then the content of put words into what I had been struggling with prayer for years. What is this? And
Yeah.
so that
I didn't know that was how.
that triggered the journey for me, for sure. And then I was fortunate enough that you were living in LA around that time, and so I got to go to a couple shows, and Matilda came to the Minchin around that time. I got bombarded with a lot of Tim within like a 2-year period where I saw
Yeah. Yeah, it was meant to be, man. It's fate.
God's plan.
God's plan. Interesting one for God, but he's always been obtuse.
That's the number one thing that God's plan for your life is the number one. No, there's no God's will. God's will for your life in American Christianity is that God has a script where you're the protagonist.
Yeah.
And you get something.
And ideally you're going to get rich. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, God's going to help you get rich. Yeah. That's very interesting, because of all my mostly my religious material is quite disciplined about making sure what I'm fighting is, as I said earlier, is taking a pickaxe to the bad walls, is or at least especially the walls built around the wealth and the around the Catholic Church and how it's used its privilege of being seen as a moral arbiter to not be held to account morally. And so thank you, God, and the good book are the two are really just A and B of each other. One about the idea that you should use the Bible as your place to go for morality because it's so good, and the other about that you should, that prayer is functional.
Right.
They are the two songs that are kind of just straight up a bit mean
about
Christianity. But they have there's a moral underpinning to the whole question.
This is what I'll say about Thank You, God, though, as I reflected on it. I think that there's a lot of grace in that song, in that it's focused at Sam, not his mom.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're looking at Sam and going, come on, man. Why did you just tell me that story? You're not taking a shot at his mom, because
I'm not even taking a shot at Sam. I'm really taking a shot at whoever fed Sam what Sam swallowed. And of course, no, there is no. So, to be a bit more radical and a bit more me about this, every priest, including Pastor Dave, that has ever lived, unless they are proper Unitarian, has spent their life lying to people about the nature of the universe, like telling lies about physics, and none of them are really to be blamed because they got told those lies. And it goes all the way back to a time before we had science. The interesting thing about living in this time and the tension between, people like science and religion, they're non-overlapping magisteria. They can live, but it's completely crazy to pretend that that post the introduction of the scientific method, that the conversations about reality are unaltered. The fact that we have religions that mostly predate science, well, all of them except the totally bonkers ones, that were all built on a pre-scientific set of beliefs and are narratives and myths for people who had no idea what lightning was, let alone what DNA is. And they have lived because of culture, because you can't just discard this massive group of stories that have been the underpinning of culture for hundreds and hundreds of years. But a priest or a preacher, in 1600 even, recently, talking about this stuff is less of a liar than a priest talking about this stuff now. because the priest now, if not a liar, the priest now has to either ignore a bunch of stuff or have not read it, which is sort of willful. It's tougher now to morally justify telling kids that Jesus has a plan for them. And I know you agree with all this stuff because your church doesn't do this stuff, but every church in the world that is telling kids that God created the world and that God, that you should pray to him because that will give you good stuff, all of them are lying. And I'm using that word very casually. I'm not freaking out about what they're saying, but it is a lie, especially now that they know all this other stuff. They should know all this other stuff.
But that's where I come back around to, I think that is myth, not the core of what the Bible is trying to say.
Yeah, totally. I get that.
And that's what I'm drilling down to. Because if you drill down into the Bible's not trying to say that God has a plan for you that works out.
No. Half the stuff we learned at church isn't even there. I mean, the Jews didn't even have a heaven, did they? Am I right about that?
Yeah, that's a construct that came in later. Yeah, totally. But we proof text and cherry pick verses that sound nice to make people feel hopeful, or to make people send money to tithe. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. That sounds really great. But that was Jeremiah telling the people who were in exile
that we're going to try and get out.
No, that God said, no, we're not going back. So he knows the plan I have. He knows the plan. The plan is to do justly, love mercy, walk humbly, no matter what the circumstances. That's what that verse is about. Like he's telling them, you want to go back to the homeland. It's not going to happen. But here's the plan. The plan is to do all this stuff that we've been teaching you right here where we are.
Yeah.
And like that's
which is Groundhog Day, right?
Yes,
which is stop trying to escape. You just have to learn how to be humble and good here. I mean, that is literally Groundhog Day.
Yes. And so that's why when I see Groundhog Day, I go, wait a minute. What is that? That's exactly what I believe in this context.
Yeah,
but
amazing.
That's a scripture that people pick up and go, well, I just lost my job, but God knows the plans he has for me. Everything's going to work out right. When it clearly in its context was not meant to say that. And that's what I want to drill down to.
Yeah. So having gone round and round and taking into account, unfortunately, I have to be in a studio in 5 minutes doing a recce because I'm doing some American telly performances of some of my songs. It's like some morning show on CBS where I get to do 3 songs and then I'm doing Corden again.
Awesome.
You heard it here first. But that's what I love about, and we should talk again because I don't know it well enough. Like I have an a priori problem with, not problem. I have my beliefs about Christianity are not built on the minutiae of the Bible. They're built on we all know that humans have made up religions forever and we shouldn't privilege them over other discussions,
Your knowledge of it is based on what it is as it is today. And that's my problem.
Yeah, that's right. Although I never really, anyway, yes. But to sort of come the full circle, it seems really meaningful and lovely to me that when you see Groundhog Day, you see Maya, whereas I see a bullfrog. Who wrote that song? Anyway, that seems profound to me, that this ancient text and the stories we're still telling ourselves in a reinterpretation of a 90s movie gel. Yeah. And the question kind of comes down to, there's a bathwater of Christianity, and you're saying don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. This isn't just that's a phrase, isn't it? Don't throw the
Yes, of
baby out.
course.
Yeah, good. I suddenly thought maybe I'm doing one of those weird English phrases. You're saying don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and I'm erring towards the bathwater's so poisonous. In so many manifestations. I think now it's going to get dark, this metaphor, but I think probably there's plenty of babies in all our other narratives. Let's kind of just get over that bath altogether. And let's go see Groundhog Day, which is a less hard to misinterpret version of a poisoned verse. That verse, if we use that verse as an example, so much of the Bible is just now mostly you see it because crazy Pentecostals are using it to justify their whatever.
Yeah, it's been used that way
theories.
for centuries. Yeah.
So the pointy end of the conversation is stop trying to polish this rusted and battered thing up. There's plenty of other stuff, and I think I don't think that's necessarily right. I think it's maybe you shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think we should consider that.
Yeah.
Maybe you should.
Well, get on to your thing. You are insanely kind for doing this podcast. I can't thank you enough. People can find your stuff, timminchin.com, Tim Minchin on all the socials. I'm sure everyone knows. Considering that only your fans and my mom will listen to this, they already know who you are. So I appreciate you, man.
I appreciate you too. And just, I really look forward to hearing who else you talk with. And I'm very interested in how you have an instinct that you have stuff to say. And I think the manner in which you're going to figure out how to say that and kind of what the sharp edges of your weapon are.
Yeah.
That's going to be the journey I'm interested in, because sometimes to get penetration, you need little sharp edges,
Yeah. I'm just shotgun spraying out into the world art. And if it's a podcast or a song or a musical or whatever, something will hit.
Yeah. That's great. Love ya.
All right, brother. Thank you so much.
Mate. Bye.